NSW
In Jamaica.
President Donald Trump's
solid waste reduction.
Marcus Happerly.
Good day, I'm Shane Masters, and welcome to News Rewind, Jnn's look at the top stories of the week that was. There are more critical reactions to comments made by Prime Minister Andrew Holness about 20 alleged dangerous criminals still detained under the state of public emergency in St. James. More from Cody and Barrett.
One attorney at law has argued that Jamaicans are being sold a narrative that is not legally accurate and which is preventing proper ventilation of the issues. In an article on the weekend, Mr. Holness stated that 20 of the most dangerous criminals in the country will be released back into their communities if the opposition vote against extending the state of emergency. He stated that if they were released, crime would immediately rise. However, attorney at law Kenyatta Powell disagrees.
So here's the false dichotomy, the false choice. The false choice we've been sold is that it's the state of emergency or nothing. So a lot of people have this idea in their heads that if we don't have the state of emergency, then preventive detention, preventive arrest is not a thing. That's something that the statutes and the common law already allows. You don't need a state of emergency to have cordons and curfews. All of those powers already exist in other aspects of the law.
The statements by Mr. Holness have also been criticized by opposition leader Dr. Peter Phillips, who questioned why no charges have been laid against the men since the state of emergency was declared nearly a year ago. Mr. Powell has also asserted that the comments by the Prime Minister about the 20 dangerous criminals have raised questions about the process being used by the security forces. The attorney says there are also wider questions about the overall plan to fight crime.
The answer to that riddle is to charge them, right? And then if you come back to me now to say, well, we know that they're bad because we have this secret intelligence, but it can't hold up in court, that is not a reason for us to institutionalize emergency powers. If the police don't have the resources to do, a proper thorough investigation and come up with material that will hold up in court, that's an argument for fixing the police force. If people don't trust that if they go and they give evidence that they will be safe, again, that's an argument for institutional change. And if we don't do the institutional change, 10 years down the road, we're going to come back to this point again.
He adds that more information was required regarding the need to extend the states of emergency.
So maybe government should say, okay, we need 2 more extensions. But what we shouldn't do, we shouldn't allow a government to tell us, because what they've essentially said, the logical conclusion of what they've said, is that they should be able to keep the state of emergency in perpetuity. Because as long as they do not tell us, or they even refuse to hint as to how many more extensions they will need, they're asking for these powers in perpetuity, and no society should grant those kinds of powers to the state. Danger lies.
Mr. Powell was speaking on RGR's Beyond the Headlines on Monday.
Meanwhile, security consultant and former Deputy Commissioner of Police Mark Shields is calling for a united front in the fight against crime. The details from Kimberly Broderick.
In reacting to the statements by the Prime Minister, Mr. Shields says he's hoping the security forces made use of the time to build cases against those who were wanted.
If we've got these people in custody, let's hope that, as it is under Section 30, subsection 4 of the Emergency Powers Act, that they are taking fingerprints, photographs, DNA, and that they are using the evidence of CCTV, cell phone forensics, DNA, facial recognition, and all of the other technology and forensics that are available and are starting to be used by our police force in order that they can secure those convictions.
He's recommending that they collaborate in organizing social and community interventions to prevent vulnerable areas from returning to high crime rates. This proposal comes in the midst of the controversy surrounding the opposition's decision not to vote for another extension of the states of emergency. Mr. Shields cites the Tivoli Gardens situation in 2010, where not enough social work was done before the security forces exited the area and crime returned as soon as they left. He is pushing for urgent attention before these states of emergency end, so the situation is not repeated.
It is important that we try to occupy the space of the criminals, that we continue to have that control. And in the meantime, at the back end, we need to ensure that this government and the opposition, working together in harmony, in consensus, find social and economic means by which we can stop the constant cycle of 20% crime reductions followed by no activity because we failed to do the back end as we did back in 2010 with Tivoli Gardens.
Mr. Shields is arguing that during the time that the state of emergency were in force, more collaboration should have been done between the government and opposition to engage more communities. He has also shared other areas which need urgent focus and firm decisions as part of the strategy of the security forces.
We need to ensure that we have a holistic approach where partnership is so important, not just for the police, but for all government agencies to work together with our international partners to ensure that we can break the back of crime. So that's not just through police either killing people or locking people up. It's through first world means by which we can work together as a team to overcome a problem that is over 30 years old.
Renowned attorney at law Frank Phipps QC is questioning why the opposition did not support the extension of the states of emergency in St. James and St. Catherine. He was a guest on JNN's Hotline Interface on Thursday, where he questioned the reason. Codian Barrett picks up with that story.
The attorney was fielding questions from the host Emily Shields on the controversial issue of the states of emergency. The argument revolved around whether or not a state of emergency should still exist, with murder falling from nearly 300 to about 58.
At what stage do you say it is no longer necessary? 58? 32? I would find it difficult to justify that.
What about
one must be guided, I would think,
yes,
by informed opinion of those on the ground.
The police.
And the military and the responsible officers.
Pressed for a response to the issue of the Prime Minister making his letter to the opposition leader public, Mr. Phipps noted that it could have been addressed differently.
Well, I haven't been in politics at that level, but I do think that the two gentlemen would know how best to communicate with each other, as may be in the public's best interest.
And you don't have a thought as to what may be in the public's best interest?
That they meet quietly, as they used to say, behind the speaker's chair, and discuss things.
Yes.
That's the way I look at it.
That's the best.
You don't just tweet to each other as is done in another country.
Mr. Phipps was also asked to respond to the Prime Minister's utterance about 20 dangerous criminals now in custody, who after the end of the period of the state of emergency would have to be unleashed in St. James.
They know these dangerous criminals. They can name them. And why do you classify them as dangerous criminals? You must have evidence to that effect. And if you have evidence that a man is a dangerous criminal, you know what to do about it. I'm sure the law can take care of that.
Justice Minister Delroy Chuck wants a sting operation to be set up to catch unscrupulous justices of the peace, JPs, red-handed. He was responding to reports that JPs are ignoring their oath of office and are affixing their seals on glowing recommendations for individuals who they do not know. More in this report.
A report in the Sunday Gleaner states that 3 justices of the peace based at the Montego Bay Bus Park in St. James were willing to sign documents for anyone while accepting what they called contributions for their service. Mr. Chuck says he'll be asking the various agencies to notify the Justice Ministry about JPs whose names turn up frequently on documents.
I'm going to ask PICA and the various agencies of government where they see JP's name turning up too often to do sting operations on them to see, in fact, if they're genuine persons recommending and identifying persons. And I will be asking the custodies that where they have information about justice of the peace that are acting inappropriately, let the ministry know.
Mr. Chuck says the ministry is willing to use private investigators to probe the operations of suspected unscrupulous JPs, and those found guilty will be decommissioned. In the meantime, the Justice Minister is expressing frustration that some JPs continue to flout the rules despite his repeated attempts to get them to do the right thing.
I must admit that was not intended to be my main point But when I saw what took place in the Gleaner, you will understand I can't help but feel very sad that something like that could have happened. Because I've spoken about it at every opportunity, virtually every month. I've asked GPs to please maintain the high integrity of the office.
Mr. Chuck was speaking at the commissioning ceremony of 36 new justices of the peace for the parish of St. Andrew Sunday evening.
It's very unlikely that the urgent meeting of Parliament's Public Accounts Committee PAC to discuss the Auditor General's report on Petrojam will not happen this year. That's a word from the PAC Chairman Mark Golding. It is, however, expected to convene within the new year. More in this report from Jnn Williams.
Controversy developed during last week's PAC meeting involving only opposition members of the committee, as it was aborted on the basis that it was improperly convened. The controversy intensified to the point where Prime Minister Andrew Holness asked for an investigation into the matter. Mr. Golding has sought to convene a second meeting and on Monday wrote to the clerk of the House and staff members who are part of the committee. He was attempting to get the meeting before the end of 2018, but his expectations have now changed.
I agree it would be difficult. I think it would be difficult to do it over the Christmas period and to bring in people, the Auditor General and staff and other persons from the PCJ and from Petrojam as well. So I suspect it would be in the new year.
The Auditor General's report on Petrojam has highlighted human resource and procurement breaches, billions in accounted oil, lack of transparency in fuel pricing, and waste of public funds on lavish festive events. In the meantime, Mr. Golding is recommending changes to the protocol dealing with the operations of parliamentary committees to protect their integrity.
I think the whole question of how committees are run and who has say over the scheduling of meetings and so on, those issues need to be carefully re-examined because it is quite possible for the government to eliminate any effective oversight of their function by these committees if they dominate calling of meetings, the setting of agendas, the appointment of chairpersons and so on. And that, I think, would weaken our democracy significantly because the committees play an important role in holding the government of the day to account, whichever government it is.
Delinquent firearm owners who have not renewed their licenses will now face 12 months in prison or a fine of $200,000 as of January 3. The period for a reprieve given by the Firearm Licensing Authority FLA comes to an end on December 31. More in this report from Michael Sharp.
The message was brought to JNN's hotline interface on Thursday by the Chief Executive Officer, Shane Dallin, who pointed out that there were still hundreds of persons who have not yet conformed.
We have gone on that compliance drive from last year, June. Mm-hmm. What we are saying, come January 3rd, 2019, we will no longer be going compliance, we'll be going enforcement. What we'll be doing is sending the list to the police and to Passport and Immigration and Citizenship Agency for an alert to be placed at all airports on persons seeking to leave the island who have not renewed their firearm license.
You have authority in law to do that?
What we are doing as a part of the architecture of the Ministry of National Security, of which PICA also falls, we're working on a MOU. What we're doing, we're not placing a stop order on the person at the airport. We're putting an alert. PICA can say to the police, we have a list, you have been advised, the individual who the Firearm Licensing Authority has stated is in breach of Section 45 of the Firearm Act and he's about to leave the island. The police can charge that person on the spot.
The intention is for them to be charged.
That is correct.
Mr. Dallin noted that despite many efforts to persuade gun owners to comply with the law, many have not. Only 3,000 of a possible 8,000 did so.
And then, when charged, the fine that would be maximum is the $200,000?
$200,000 or 12 months imprisonment.
Okay. Plus, they'd have to bring themselves up to the annual registration.
And we would need to know where the firearm is, because that is very important to us.
Or they need to bring it in?
We need to know where it is, because we have not seen those firearms for years in most cases.
Right.
The CEO outlined what it is that the delinquent owners are facing, including revocation of their license.
Any offense under the Firearm Act makes a person liable for revocation, because that's one of the next steps we'll be taking.
Yes.
While we're going on enforcement through the police, we'll be seeking to also gather information in order to revoke those licenses.
And the National Water Commission, NWC, says its checks have revealed that fumes which affected workers and visitors of the Hope Botanical Gardens in St. Andrew were not the result of a chlorine leak from its Hope water treatment plant. Codian Barrett has the details.
The Hope Botanical Garden sits next door to the NWC water treatment plant. It was suggested that the fumes which resulted in some workers falling ill may have been from the NWC facility. The NWC president, Mark Barnett, says this is not so.
You know that our facility is located adjoining Hope Garden. The first contemplation for us would be to assess if there's any chemical leak, and by chemical we will speak of chlorine gas. Our investigation is that there was actually no chlorine gas leakage at the facility, as was reported.
In the meantime, the NWC has decided against attempting to repair a major pipeline break along the Mandela Highway. The NWC president says this is because it is not cost-effective to carry out the repairs.
It's an asbestos pipe, 18-inch asbestos pipe that serves along the boulevard all the way up to Dunrobin. Our assessment is that it is not cost-effective at this time to even repair that pipe. And so what we have been doing within the network, within KSA, is to make those modifications that would allow for water to be distributed through other means to Glenny Park, etc. So we are not going to attempt to repair that pipeline at this time.
Sections of the corporate area have been experiencing reduced water pressure or have been without water as a result of the break which occurred on December 8. Several houses were flooded in the ferry community. Mr. Barnett notes that the NWC is working to restore water to all customers through other pipelines.
We are putting measures to serve the affected communities through another pipeline which runs along the same corridor. So we are actually making an interconnection to relieve some of the disruption to some customers closer to the Glenny Park area. For customers further up the boulevard, they will be served from a different source, predominantly through our Mona system. And we are still monitoring because some customers may still be experiencing low water pressure, and in some instances maybe no water as well.
We take a break. News Rewind will be right back after these messages.
NSW
Jamaica,
President Donald Trump's
waste reduction.
Marcus Welcome back to News Rewind. We continue our look at the top stories of the week that was. The Nurses Association of Jamaica, NAJ, is calling for the government to immediately find long-term solutions to the issues at the Victoria Jubilee and Kingston Public Hospitals, which are hampering the delivery of health care. More from Kimberly Broderick.
Opposition spokesman on health, Dr. Dayton Campbell, has said scheduled surgeries at both facilities have been delayed due to staff shortages, a non-functioning operating theatre, and inadequate ventilators. The NAJ president, Carmen Johnson, says these issues are not new. She notes that these problems are due to a lack of maintenance.
Most of our facilities are short of equipment and supplies, and one of the other things is that the maintenance of our major equipment in the facilities are non-existent. And so KPH is one of those institutions who also has their challenge with equipment in the operating theatre, to include their light that is not functioning, that needs to be repaired or needs to be replaced. And so KPH, also having been one of our referral centers, is also challenged with the number of patients that they have to see. So it is a given that you have patients who are scheduled who may have to be rescheduled because, again, they operate as an emergency center because we don't have those kind of facilities.
Ms. Johnson has also expressed concern about the ability of the hospitals to handle an expected increase in cases associated with the Christmas season.
In December, usually what they would normally start doing because of the Christmas season and how we behave sometimes socially, you find out that they would start scaling down, all the facilities start scaling down their schedule list. and so would leave space for the additional emergencies that would come in. But KPH not having two of their satellites, as was told to you, working, that can sometimes hamper how they function.
The NAJ notes that the Ministry of Health had promised to address the issue of maintenance at a meeting with the association some time ago.
The minister had said that they were looking at addressing the maintenance and repairs by bringing in Cubans who would have been able to repair this. What we recognize is that in some of the facilities where the Cubans come, they are not being able to repair them as much as they should or as quickly, because then again you have the purchase of parts and so on that is delayed sometimes.
And antibiotic abuse has become a major concern. There are concerns of individuals begging doctors for antibiotic when it is not needed, while some sharing their prescribed antibiotic with others and those who do not take it as prescribed by their doctors. Head of the Microbiology Department of the University of the West Indies, Dr. Alison Nicholson, is warning against these practices. More from Cody and Barrett.
Dr. Nicholson warns that the island could possibly face a crisis of antibiotic resistance illnesses. The abuse, she says, should not be taken lightly as antibiotic resistance is real and it kills. She is urging medical practitioners to prescribe these medications and advise patients responsibly.
You use antibiotics responsibly by advising your patients what to do when you give them a course of antibiotics. That's from the doctor's perspective. Take 2 minutes out of your busy practice to explain to the patients the problem of antibiotic resistance and the important role that they will be playing, not just nationally or locally, but globally, if they take their antibiotics properly.
She also has a warning for the patients.
Help us. Do not pressure your doctors for antibiotics. You will be given antibiotics when these are necessary, and when you get your antibiotics, follow instructions, stick to what you're asked to do, you're told to do, complete your course, do not share, and do us a favor, pass on this message to others.
She highlights the importance of the availability of the drugs.
Antibiotics are not a cure-all. They are extremely important in the practice of medicine. Without antibiotics, many of the advances that we have had in the last few years will disappear. Heart surgery, organ transplant, chemotherapy, all of those depend on the availability of antibiotics to treat infections that might emerge. So if you lose antibiotics, we'll be throwing back medicine, the medical practice, many, many years.
Dr. Nicholson laments that if there are no antibiotics for treatment, patients will die. But while the country cannot completely eradicate antibiotic resistance, the process can be slowed down. This, she reiterates, with responsible usage. She was speaking on JNN's Insight on Wednesday.
And that's your News Rewind for this week. I'm Shane Masters. Thanks for watching.